You ever see a kid flinch before anyone even raises a hand? That's how I knew something was wrong with the girl from the blue house on Pine Hollow Road. She was maybe 10, 11, skinny in the way that isn't natural for a child. And every time a door slammed somewhere down the street, her whole little body would jerk like she'd been hit by lightning. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. My name's Harlan Beck. I'm 61 years old now, and I run a small feed and hardware store at the bottom of the mountain in a town called Stony Creek, North Carolina, way up in the folds of the Blue Ridge where the roads twist so much your coffee spills if you take a turn too fast. We get about 400 people up here in summer, less in winter. The kind of place where everyone knows your truck before they know your face. This story isn't really about me, though. It's about a man named Eli Ward and a girl named Maren Doss. Eli lived alone in a cabin about 3 miles up the ridge from my store. He'd been widowed 8 years by the time any of this happened. His wife Ruth had passed from cancer the spring before I moved my store to the new building. He came down once a month for flour, coffee, nails, whatever he needed, paid in cash, said much obliged and left. That was Eli. 47 years old, broad in the shoulders, beard going salt on pepper, eyes that looked like they were always watching the tree line for something. Not unfriendly, just done with most things. He had a daughter once, a little girl named Hannah. She died with her mother, same accident sort of. Ruth was pregnant when the cancer was found and they lost both of them within the same season. Folks up here don't talk about it much. We just knew not to ask. Now Maren came later. Her family moved into the blue house on Pine Hollow in the fall of 17. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn and the moving truck got stuck on the switchback by the church. Took 2 men with chains to pull it loose. The father's name was Dale. Big man, red face, the kind of voice that carried across a parking lot whether you wanted it to or not. The mother was thin and tired looking, always staring at her shoes. And then there was Maren. She came into my store the second day they lived here, walked in behind her mother holding the woman's hand so tight her knuckles were white. Brown hair down past her shoulders, a face that should have been laughing but wasn't. She didn't look at anything, just at the floor. I said, "Hey there, sweetheart, you like peppermints?" She looked up at her mother first, asking permission with her eyes. The mother gave a small nod. Then Maren nodded at me slow, like she wasn't sure it was allowed. I gave her one from the jar by the register. She held it in her palm like it was made of glass. Her mother said, "Thank the man, Maren." "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. That was the first time I saw her, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice the bruise on her arm where her sleeve had ridden up. Yellow-green, old. The kind that's been healing for a week. I didn't say anything. I should have. I'll carry that until I'm in the ground. The winter that year was hard. Snow came early and stayed. Pine Hollow Road gets bad when it snows because it doesn't get plowed regular. County doesn't have the money. So folks up there get isolated. You don't see your neighbors for weeks sometimes. I saw Dale Doss more than I wanted to. He came into my store for kerosene and chewing tobacco and beer when the gas station was closed. He always smelled like he'd been drinking already. Not falling down drunk. Just that low simmer that some men live in. He talked too loud about politics or hunting or whatever was on his mind. I'd nod and ring him up and watch him leave. One time he brought Maren with him. Must have been late January. Cold enough that the inside of my windows had frost. She was wearing a coat 2 sizes too big and rubber boots with no socks. Her ankles were red from the cold. Dale was looking at fishing line of all things, talking to himself. Maren stood by the candy display, not touching anything, just looking. I walked over slow, didn't want to spook her. "You can have one," I said, "on the house." She looked at her father. He wasn't paying attention. She looked back at me. Then she reached out, very careful, and picked up a small piece of butterscotch. Held it the same way she'd held the peppermint, like a treasure. "Maren," her father said from across the store, Not loud, just flat. She froze. Put it back. She put it back. We don't take charity. Wasn't charity, I said. I was just. Sir, he looked at me then. His eyes were the color of muddy water. I appreciate the gesture, but she don't need candy. She needs to learn to ask for things proper. Sure, I said, because what else do you say? He grabbed her by the back of the neck, not hard, not in a way you could prove anything by, and steered her toward the door. She didn't make a sound. She just went where his hand told her to go. I watched them pull out of the lot in his old gray pickup, and I stood there for a long time after with my hand on the counter feeling like I just watched something get stolen and done nothing about it. Now here's where Eli comes in. Eli came down off the mountain maybe twice that winter. First time in December for a tarp and some rope. Second time in February for a wood stove part. Both times he was in and out in under 10 minutes. Didn't say more than 3 words. But the third time, that was different. It was a Tuesday in March. Snow had started to thaw, but the ground was still hard. I remember because there was mud on the floor of the store from the morning crowd, and I was mopping it when the bell rang. Eli walked in. He looked tired or angry. With him it was hard to tell the difference. He said, Harlan. Eli. Need a word. I leaned the mop against the wall. There's a kid, he said, up by my place, walking on the logging road this morning. No coat, just a sweater, maybe 10 years old. I felt something cold drop into my stomach. Brown hair, I said, skinny. He nodded. She have a bruise on her face. He went still, the kind of still that's not calm. On her cheek, he said, right cheekbone fresh. I told him about the family, about Dale, about the bruise on her arm in October and the way she'd put the butterscotch back, about everything I'd seen and hadn't done anything about. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I was finished, he just stood there for a minute looking at the floor. Then he said, Where'd she go, when you saw her this morning? I didn't see her this morning, you did. He shook his head. I mean, did she keep walking or did she turn around? You didn't talk to her. I asked if she needed help, she ran. He said it quiet, but there was something in his face when he said it, something that looked a lot like guilt. I said, Eli, you can't go up to that house. I know. Dale Doss is not a man you reason with. I know. You call the sheriff. He looked at me, really looked, and he said, Harlan, you and I both know how that goes. He was right. He was right, and I hated that he was right. Sheriff up here is a man named Bo Pritchard. Good man in his way. But the county sheriff's office has 4 deputies for 1,000 square miles, and most of what they handle is meth labs and drunk drivers on the highway. A kid with a bruise on her face whose father says she fell off a swing that doesn't get followed up on. Not the way it should. They send somebody out, the father lies, the mother nods along, the kid goes back inside, and then the kid pays for the visit later. Everybody up here has a story like that, or knows somebody with one. But Eli still went a Bo. I know because Bo came into my store the next day to ask me about it. Harlan, he said, Eli Ward came by yesterday. Yeah. Talking about a kid on Pine Hollow. The Doss girl. Bo nodded. He took off his hat and set it on my counter and rubbed his face with both hands. I went out there, he said, knocked on the door. And father answered, said the kid took a tumble on the porch steps. Mother backed him up. Kid was in the kitchen eating cereal looking right as rain. You believe him? Bo looked at me a long time before he answered. Doesn't matter what I believe, Harlan. I got nothing to act on. I said, what if something happens to her? He picked his hat back up, settled it on his head. Then I'll have something to act on, and I'll hate myself for it. He left. I didn't see him again for 2 weeks. Eli, though. Eli started coming down the mountain almost every day after that. He'd find reasons, needed a hinge, needed batteries, needed a different kind of nail. He'd buy one small thing, and then stand in my doorway looking out at the road for half an hour like he was waiting on a bus that wasn't coming. I knew what he was watching for. One afternoon, must have been mid-April, Marin came into the store alone, by herself. No mother, no father, just walked in like she'd done it 100 times. She had a quarter clutched in her fist. She put it on the counter and pointed at the butterscotch. "One, please," she said. I rang it up like she was a regular customer, gave her the candy, gave her change, a nickel, which she put in her pocket so careful you'd think it was a $100 bill. I said, "Marin, how'd you get here?" "Walked. From your house." She nodded. "That's almost 2 miles, honey." She shrugged. "Mama's sleeping, Daddy went to town." I looked at her, really looked. There was a mark on her jaw, a small one, half hidden by her hair, and her bottom lip was split. I said, "Sweetheart, did somebody hurt you?" She put the butterscotch in her pocket without unwrapping it. "I gotta go," she said, "before Daddy gets back." She turned to leave, and right then Eli walked in. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, and she looked at him. And I swear to you, in that moment, something passed between them. I don't know what to call it. Recognition, maybe. The way one wounded animal sees another and knows. He crouched down, knee on the floor, so they were eye level. He said, "You were on the road last month." She nodded. "You ran." She nodded again, smaller this time. He said, "You don't have to run from me, miss. I promise you that." She didn't say anything, but she didn't run either. Then she said very quiet, "I gotta go home." Eli stood up. He looked at me. Then he looked at her. He pulled his old leather wallet out of his back pocket and took out a 20. He folded it in half and held it out to her. "For if you ever need anything," he said. "From Mr. Beck here, any time. You walk down here and you tell him you need something, you give him this and he'll give you whatever you want. Food, a coat, a ride somewhere, anything." She looked at the money like it might bite her. "I can't take that." "Yes, you can. Daddy would." "Daddy doesn't have to know. You hide it. Somewhere he won't find it, and you keep it for if you need it." She looked at me. I nodded. Whatever this was, I was in it now. She took the 20, folded it small, put it in her sock. Then she left. Eli stood in my doorway watching her walk away up the road, the little figure of her getting smaller and smaller against the trees. He said without turning around, "Harlan, if she comes back here, you call me. No matter what, you call me first." "I will." "Before the sheriff." "Eli." "Before anyone, just me." He turned around. His eyes were wet. I hadn't seen Eli Ward cry since the funeral. "I lost one," he said. "I'm not losing another." And then he walked out. That spring was the longest of my life. I think about it now, and it feels like one of those years that lasted 10. Marin came to the store maybe 4 more times before May, always alone, always for something small, a piece of candy, a pencil once, a packet of dry soup mix she said was for her mother. Each time I looked her over for new bruises. Each time I found some. Each time I called Eli on the landline the minute she left. He'd be down within the hour, sometimes within 20 minutes. He'd come in, ask me what she'd taken, what she'd said. He'd write it down in a little black notebook he kept in his coat pocket. Date, time, what she looked like, what she ate. I didn't know it at the time, but he was building a record. Because Eli, you see, and this is something I learned later, Eli had been an army medic. He knew what bruises looked like at different stages. He knew what burn marks meant and what defensive wounds looked like on the forearms. He was watching her like a doctor and writing it down like an investigator. He was getting ready for something. I just didn't know what. The day everything changed was the second Saturday in May. A warm day. The dogwoods were blooming. There was that smell on the air that mountain people know, wet earth and pine sap and the river running high. I was working alone that morning. My nephew Cole was supposed to be helping, but his truck wouldn't start. The store was quiet, maybe one customer in the first 3 hours. And then around 11, Marin came in. She wasn't walking right. That's the first thing I noticed. She was favoring her left side, holding her right arm against her ribs. Her face was white, not pale, white like she'd been bled. She didn't say anything to me. She just stood in the middle of the store, swaying a little. I came around the counter and crouched down and I said, "Marin, honey, what happened?" She tried to talk and nothing came out. She tried again. "He's looking for me," she said. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped it twice before I got Eli's number dialed. He answered on the second ring. I said, "She's here, she's hurt, come now." He didn't say anything. The line just went dead. He was already moving. I came back around the counter. Marin was sitting on the floor now, leaning against the candy display. She had her arm wrapped around her ribs, and there was a smear of blood on her chin from her nose. I got a wet rag from the back, got her some water in a paper cup. She drank it in 2 swallows. "Where's your mama?" I said. Her eyes filled up. "She tried to stop him," she whispered. "She tried." I didn't ask anything else. I just sat there on the floor next to her and put my hand on her shoulder real light and waited. Outside, gravel crunched. A truck door slammed. I thought it was Eli. It wasn't. It was Dale. He came through the door, so hard the bell tore off the frame. His shirt was untucked. There was blood on his knuckles. He had that look on his face that some men get when they've stopped being a person and become something else. Pure rage running on cheap whiskey. He saw Marin on the floor. He said, "There you are." She made a sound I'd never heard a child make before, something between a whimper and a held breath. Dale started toward her. I stepped between them. "Dale," I said, "let's talk a minute." "Get out of my way, Harlan. She's hurt, she needs a doctor. She's a damn liar and she's coming home." "Dale." He shoved me, hard. I'm 61 and he's 40 and built like a barrel. I went into the rack of fishing rods and they came down around me in a clatter. My hip hit the floor and I felt something pop in a way that wasn't good. He grabbed Marin by the arm she'd been holding against her ribs. She screamed. I tried to get up, couldn't, my leg wouldn't work right. He was dragging her toward the door. And that's when the second truck pulled up outside. I heard the engine before I saw it. Eli's old Ford, the one with the rattling muffler that you could hear coming half a mile away. The brakes squealed. A door slammed. And then Eli Ward walked into my store. I've thought about that moment 1,000 times. The way Eli came through the door, the way he didn't rush. He just walked in slow and steady like he had all the time in the world, like he was stepping into his own living room. He was wearing a brown canvas coat, mud on his boots. His hair was wind-blown from the drive down the mountain, and his face, God, his face. It was the calmest thing in that room. That's what scared me. He looked at Dale and Marin and the broken fishing rods and me on the floor, and he didn't show one flicker of anything. That's a man who's already decided what he's going to do, I thought, and he's not in any hurry to do it. Dale stopped, halfway to the door, Marin hanging from his grip like a rag doll. He said, "Who the hell are you?" Eli didn't answer. He just looked at Dale's hand on Marin's arm. Then he looked at Marin. He said, "Sweetheart, you let go now. He's not gonna hold you anymore." Marin went limp. Her knees buckled. Dale, off balance, tried to keep her up by yanking on her arm, but she just slid down through his grip until she was sitting on the floor at his feet. Dale said, "You don't put your hands on my kid." Eli said, "I haven't put my hands on anyone, sir." His voice was quiet, like he was talking to a horse that might bolt. Dale's face got redder. She's coming home. She's not. Excuse me. She's not going home with you. Not today, not ever. I was watching this from the floor, trying to drag myself up using the counter. My hip felt like glass. Dale laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind a man does when he can't believe what he's hearing. You know who I am, Dale said. I know exactly who you are. Then you know to step aside. Eli took one step forward, just one, but it changed the whole room. He said, Mr. Doss, I'm gonna tell you what's about to happen, and I'm gonna tell you once. Dale's hand drifted toward his waistband. I saw it. Eli saw it. Eli said, you touch that knife and I'll take it from you and I'll make you eat it. You understand me? Dale's hand stopped. Eli said, you're gonna step away from that little girl. You're gonna walk out that door. You're gonna get in your truck, and you're gonna drive home and wait for the sheriff to come get you, because he's on his way. And when he gets there, you're gonna confess to every single thing you've ever done to her and to her mama. And then you're gonna go to prison. And you're never gonna see this child again as long as you live. Dale stared at him. You can't make me do nothing, he said. No, sir, I can't make you do any of it. You're a grown man. You'll do what you choose, but I'll tell you this. If you take one more step toward this girl right now, you and me are gonna have a problem in this store, and only one of us is gonna walk out. The silence that came after that was the longest 5 seconds of my life. I could hear the wall clock ticking. I could hear Marin's breathing fast and shallow. I could hear my own heart in my ears. Dale moved. He didn't go for the knife. He went for Eli. He came in hard, the way a man does when he's used to winning fights by being bigger. He swung a wide right hand at Eli's head, the kind of punch that breaks jaws in bar parking lots. Eli wasn't there. I don't know how a man that size moves that fast. He stepped inside the punch like he was stepping over a puddle, caught Dale's wrist with his left hand, hooked his right elbow up under Dale's chin, and in one motion, like he was lifting a sack of feed, he had Dale face down on the floor of my store with his arm twisted up behind him. Dale screamed, not a curse, just a high sound of pain. Eli put his knee on the small of Dale's back and held him there. He looked at me. Harlan phone. I crawled to the counter, got the phone, dialed 911 with shaking fingers, got it to my ear. Stony Creek Mercantile, I said. Pine Ridge Road, I need the sheriff, I need an ambulance. There's a child here, hurt bad, father attacked us. The dispatcher started asking questions. I just kept saying, come now, come now, come now. Eli looked at Marin. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded. She was crying without making any sound, the way kids cry when they've learned not to make noise. Can you stand up? She tried, she couldn't. That's all right, you just sit there, don't look at him, look at me, look at my face, right here, good girl. Dale was thrashing, trying to buck Eli off. Eli adjusted his weight and Dale stopped. Dale said into the floor, you're a dead man. Eli said, maybe, but not today. The sheriff got there in 12 minutes. 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Bo Pritchard came in first, then a deputy whose name I never caught. They took one look at the scene and Bo just said, Lord have mercy. He took Dale from Eli, cuffed him, walked him out to the cruiser. The deputy stayed with Marin. He was a young guy, couldn't have been more than 25. He crouched down next to her and started talking to her real soft, asking her where it hurt. She wouldn't talk to him. She kept looking past him at Eli like she was checking that he was still there. Eli didn't move from that spot. He stood with his back to the wall where she could see him. The ambulance came 20 minutes after that. 2 paramedics. They tried to look Marin over right there, but she got panicky when they touched her. Eli crouched down again. Marin, these people are gonna help you. Don't leave. I won't leave. Promise. I promise, I'm gonna ride in the truck with you. I'm not going anywhere. They got her on a stretcher, loaded her in. Eli climbed up after her without anyone telling him he could. Before the doors closed, Bo caught my eye through the window of my store. He gave me a look I'll never forget. It wasn't pity. It wasn't anger. It was something more like shame. Like he was apologizing for every visit to that blue house that he hadn't pushed harder on. The ambulance pulled out. The cruiser followed. And then I was alone in my store with broken fishing rods on the floor and blood on the linoleum, and a hip that wouldn't hold my weight. My nephew Cole showed up an hour later with his truck finally running. He found me sitting on the floor against the counter, staring at nothing. "Uncle Harlan," he said, "what happened?" I tried to tell him. I couldn't. I just started crying instead. Now here's what I learned later, because I wasn't there. But I got it from Bo, and from a nurse at the hospital who's a cousin of mine, and from Eli himself when he was finally ready to talk about it. Marin had 4 broken ribs, a broken collarbone, a hairline fracture in her left wrist, bruising on her kidneys consistent with repeated blunt force, cigarette burns on her thighs that had been hidden under her clothes for months, some old, some not so old. She had a healed-over break in her right forearm that had never been set properly. She'd been walking around with a bone that had knit crooked because no one had ever taken her to a doctor. The doctor who examined her, a woman named Dr. Annette Webb, who I'd known since she was a teenager working summers at the Dairy Queen. She came out of that exam room and went into the hospital bathroom and threw up. She told me that herself years later. She said she'd been a doctor for 16 years, and that was the worst case of long-term child abuse she'd ever personally laid eyes on. Marin's mother, Susan Das, they found her in the kitchen of the blue house on Pine Hollow when they went to do the welfare check. She was alive, barely. Dale had beaten her with a piece of firewood that morning when she tried to stop him from going after Marin again. She had a fractured skull and internal bleeding. She made it to the hospital. She didn't make it through the night. I want to be honest about that, because it matters. Marin didn't lose her father that day. She lost her mother too. The one person in that house who had tried, in whatever small broken way she could, to stand between her daughter and that man, and she'd paid for it with her life. Marin didn't speak for 9 days after that. She was conscious. She ate when they gave her food. She slept when they gave her medicine, but she didn't say a single word. Eli stayed at the hospital the whole time. The nurses tried to send him home. They told him he wasn't family. He told them he was the closest thing to family she had right now, and they could call the sheriff if they wanted him removed. The sheriff, of course, had no interest in removing him. Bo came by on day 3 and signed something. I don't know exactly what, some kind of emergency paperwork. That made Eli a temporary guardian until family services could sort it out. He slept in a chair next to her bed. He ate vending machine food. He read her every book in the children's section of the hospital library. He didn't ask her to talk. He just talked to her. He told her about the mountain, about the way the fog came up out of the hollows in the morning, about the deer that came through his backyard at dusk, about the creek behind his cabin and the fish that lived in it. On day 9, she said, "I want to see the deer." Those were her first words. Eli put his head down on the edge of her bed and cried. The legal stuff took months. I'm not going to bore you with all of it. There were court dates and custody hearings, and a social worker named Patricia, who I think saved Marin's life almost as much as Eli did. There was the question of relatives. Susan Das had a sister in Tennessee who came to the funeral and stayed for 1 day and made it real clear she didn't want a damaged child in her house. Dale had a brother in Florida who was in prison himself. There was nobody. Nobody but a 47-year-old widowed mountain man with a cabin and a pickup truck, and a heart that had been broken so many times it had grown back stronger than it started. Patricia, the social worker, she came to my store one afternoon to ask me about Eli, about his character, about whether I thought he could raise a girl. I told her the truth. I told her that Eli Ward was the quietest man I'd ever known and probably the kindest. I told her he'd lost a wife and a daughter, and that some men don't come back from that. I told her he hadn't really come back from it either, but that he was the kind of broken that you'd want guarding a child, because he knew exactly what it cost to lose one. She wrote it down in her notebook. She thanked me, she left. I don't know what tipped the scales. I don't know who else she talked to. But 3 weeks after Maren got out of the hospital, the court named Eli her temporary guardian. 6 months after that, permanent. He took her up to the cabin on the mountain on a Sunday afternoon in July. I was at the store when they drove past, Eli's old Ford. Maren in the passenger seat. She was looking out the window at the trees. She still had a cast on her wrist. She had her face pressed up against the glass like she'd never seen the woods before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she'd never really seen anything before. The first year was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. Eli told me later that she had nightmares almost every night for the first 6 months. She'd wake up screaming. He'd come into her room and sit on the floor next to her bed and just be there. He didn't touch her. He'd learned not to touch her when she was scared. He'd just sit there in the dark and say, "You're at the cabin. You're with Eli. You're safe." Sometimes that would be enough. Sometimes she'd cry until she fell asleep again. She wouldn't eat in front of him for the first 3 weeks. She'd take her plate and go to her room and eat sitting on the floor against her bedroom door. Eli let her. He didn't make a thing of it. She didn't like men's voices being loud. She didn't like doors being slammed. She didn't like the smell of beer. She didn't like the sound of trucks pulling into the gravel drive. All of these were things Eli had to learn one at a time, usually by doing them wrong and watching her go pale. He stopped drinking entirely. He hadn't drunk much before, a beer maybe twice a month with dinner, but he poured what was in the fridge down the sink the first night she was there. He never bought another one. He started parking his truck way down at the end of the drive and walking up to the cabin so she'd hear his footsteps coming instead of an engine. He learned to talk softer than he already did, which I would have said was impossible. And slowly, so slowly you almost couldn't see it happening, Maren started to come back. She started smiling around month 4. Small smiles, the kind that would disappear if you looked at them too directly. She started eating at the table around month 5. She started talking to Eli without being asked a question around month 6. By the time school started in September, a year and 3 months after the day in my store, she was a different child. Still small, still careful, still flinched at certain things. But she was a child. She laughed sometimes. She had opinions about what she wanted for dinner. She got bored. She got curious. She asked questions. Eli enrolled her at Stony Creek Elementary. The teacher there, a woman named Mrs. Atwell who I'd gone to high school with, she came into my store the first week of October. She wanted to know about Maren, because Maren wouldn't talk to the other kids and she wouldn't go to recess, and she sat by herself at lunch and stared at her food. I told Mrs. Atwell some of the story, not all of it, enough. Mrs. Atwell took her hand off her coffee cup and held it over her mouth for a long minute. Then she said, "Harlan, I will take care of that little girl in my classroom. You tell Mr. Ward not to worry." And she did. God bless her, she did. By Christmas of that year, Maren had a friend, a girl named Bate. Bate's family ran the diner on Main Street. Bate came up to the cabin one Saturday for a sleepover and brought a stuffed rabbit for Maren that her grandmother had made. Eli told me later that Maren slept holding that rabbit every night for a year. By spring, Maren had 2 friends. By summer, she was on the church softball team. She wasn't fixed. I want to be careful saying that. You don't get fixed from what happened to her. That stays in you. That lives in your bones and your dreams and the way you flinch when somebody raises their voice. But she was healing. The way a tree heals around a wound. It grows new wood over the old hurt. The scar is still there, but the tree keeps growing. I want to tell you about one afternoon, because it's the moment I knew. I knew the way you know certain things without having to say them. It was April, about 2 years after the day Eli walked into my store. Maren was 13, tall now. Taller than I expected her to be. Turns out she'd been small because she'd been malnourished and afraid, and once both of those things stopped, she shot up like a weed. She came into the store with Eli on a Saturday morning. They were stocking up for a fishing trip. Eli was going up to a spot he knew on the Linville. They'd be gone overnight. Maren walked right up to the candy display. She picked up a piece of butterscotch. She unwrapped it. She put it in her mouth. Then she looked at me and smiled. A real smile, the kind that goes all the way up to the eyes. She said, "Mr. Beck, can I get a few more for the trip?" I said, "Sweetheart, you take as many as you want." She took 6. She put 2 in her pocket and held the others in her hand. Eli watched her do it, and his eyes did this thing where they got soft and far away at the same time. I'd seen that look before. I'd seen it on my own face in the mirror after my wife died, and I was looking at a picture of her on the mantle. It was love. The bottomless, terrible, grateful kind of love that only happens after you've already lost everything once. He saw me watching him. He nodded at me just barely. I nodded back. He paid for the candy and the fishing line and the bag of jerky. And then he and Maren walked out of my store, into the spring sunshine, toward their truck, toward the mountain, toward a life that neither of them had thought they would ever get. I watched them through the window until they were out of sight. And then I sat down on my stool behind the counter, and I put my hands flat on the wood, and I just stayed there a while. Because some days the world surprises you. Some days the worst thing that ever happened to somebody is the door that opens to the best thing. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm not saying it makes anything okay. It doesn't. But it happens, sometimes to some people. It happened to them.